Okay, here we go. So, um, so what I'm talking about today is a larger theme about consumer behavior and buying patterns. That's fine. Um, Something that I've been really deep into studying these two books over the last few months. Um, but it's a larger topic that falls into a different type of research that I've been obsessed with over the last year and a half. So the resources here that I'm sort of citing, um, How Brands Grow Part One, How Brands Grow Part Two, and then also this long research paper that was published by Google that I have a printout of that's called "Decoding Decisions, Making Sense of the Messy Middle." All of this is to sort of try and describe how people make decisions in the modern digital age, because marketing texts love to talk about the buying funnel. They love to talk about how, there's essentially three stages of the buying funnel. There's awareness, consideration, and conversion. And this model worked for a very long time in advertising. Um, Back when awareness was generated with television and radio ads, consideration was largely done from like newspaper ads. You could get coupons and other junk that was kind of lowering your consideration set. And then you would make purchase decisions, conversion actions in store. So marketers would optimize shelf space or in-store promotions. Now, what was different about that model was that when you were sitting home on your couch and you see a Procter and Gamble ad or a Tide detergent ad, you physically could not convert. There was no other consideration to be looking at that moment. You were watching essentially one of four TV shows. You were being served this Tide detergent ad, and you had to kind of be aware of this the next time you needed detergent. So that funnel was very linear, and it made sense, and it worked for about 100 years. But that all goes out the window now, because these things are all jumbled together. So it's a very complicated system. Um, so all these things kind of tie together, and I think it's really important because as marketers, or really just as human beings, we tend to jump to conclusions a lot. So what I really am trying to propose here is a different mental model and a different way of thinking about solving problems. My ultimate goal from this entire conversation is to essentially have everyone trained to consider multiple angles when making decisions for clients, for advertising strategy, and so on and so forth. Like, if nothing else, what I want you to get out of this is to remove the word people from your lexicon. Probably never mentioned this publicly before, but it drives me crazy whenever I hear anybody, whether it's here or client or anyone, say something like, people like, people want 2-day shipping, or people really like seeing scarcity in ads. That drives me nuts because that assumes that every single, like the majority of people act the same way. And the more you really dive into the data and you become more of a student of academic research reports from a marketing standpoint, you'll learn that that's actually not the case. So this is kind of like a top level framework about how I've been thinking more about solving problems for clients, and I hope you guys find it both useful and interesting. I went to college. I studied marketing. I spent a lot of money on a marketing degree that taught me a few different things. Um, the spoiler alert here is that all these things have since been debunked, and I wasted that money. But basically, what I learned in marketing school is that product and brand differentiation is essential. I learned that loyalty matters. I learned that retaining a customer is cheaper than buying a new customer or retaining or signing a new client. I learned that price promotions boost market penetration. I learned that the positioning of your brand image determines who your competitors are and how you stand out against them. I learned that our customers are different. I learned that customers have a special reason that they choose to buy from us. I learned the Pareto principle that states that 20% of our heaviest customers deliver 80% of our sales, that 80-20 rule that everyone's heard about. And then lastly, I learned that mass marketing is dead. Long live audience segmentation. Um, these texts that I've been so obsessed with essentially the last year and a half, sort of disprove most of these things. And the point, though, is not that I've completely changed my opinion. I happen to think that price promotions are effective in certain areas. I think that differentiation can help you stand out. I happen to think that in certain cases, the 80-20 rule does exist, and that in plenty of cases, mass marketing is not as effective as really segmented marketing. But what's important here is that as marketers, we are aware of the fact that we are swinging a pendulum back and forth. Over the last 15 years, basically since Google AdWords became a thing, marketers became so obsessed with audience segmentation and all these nuanced ways. And we wanted to say, well, we're going to send this email and then we're going to drip this email to them because people then like to see this email. And that's bullshit and doesn't actually work. So the other side of it, though, of like, oh, mass marketing is what sells thing. That's kind of like the how brands grow model. That also doesn't always work. So I think it's really important as an agency where we're able to see the landscape across the board and be able to be involved in dozens of clients. And really our ads interact with hundreds of thousands of people every day. I think it's important for us to be able to say, okay, well, sometimes that works, sometimes none of these things work. This is the premise of that principle that I talk about all the time, which is the never, always, never, never. There's no right strategy that works 100% of the time. There's no one idea that works 100% of the time. But similarly, there's also no like horrendously bad ideas that should be completely discounted forever. Like mass marketing still works in a lot of cases. There is a reason why so many people bought Super Bowl ads. Even the most innovative companies in the world, right? You would think like all these crypto companies are pretty innovative, and they all chose to buy traditional television advertising. Why? Because in certain cases, for certain goals and certain marketing mixes, it's effective. So the whole how brands grow thesis can really be summarized in these with this table, right? So we're looking at the old worldview versus what Byron Sharp, who's the author, what his new worldview is. So we look at how do buyers buy? Well, I was taught in marketing school that buyers respond to positioning. Now, Sharp would argue that buyers are satisficers, meaning buyers are like, they're looking for heuristics. They're looking for the easiest solution that's going to get them. Like, I don't really care about finding the world's greatest bottle of water. I'm going to go and I'm going to buy something that's with somewhere in a price range. It looks like it's not going to kill me. I'm a satisficer. Okay, fine. How buyers view brands. Marketers like to think, and this is what I was taught in college, that there's an emotional connection, that people fall in love with your brand. No one actually does that. Where it's loyalty is driven by behavioral loyalty more so than emotional connection. I don't continue to buy an iPhone because I love Apple. Now, granted, there are plenty of people who are emotionally loyal to Apple, but I'll show you in a few later slides that really represents a small vocal percentage of the larger Apple ecosystem. I continue to buy iPhones because I've just been doing it forever, and like all my friends have iPhones and I just don't want to deal with it, and it's the simplest thing. The apps are already there. I'm behaviorally loyal at this point to Apple. Okay, how marketers win. Best targeting, messaging, and unique selling proposition wins. That's what we were taught, but Sharp would argue that whomever owns physical and mental availability wins. And we'll talk about what those terms mean in a bit. How brands grow. Old worldview, keep your customers happy, invest in retention, and Sharp will say, no, go and find new customers. So let's see, I just want to take a look at my notes here. So here's like three main conclusions from all of this stuff, right? So growth in market share comes from increasing popularity and gaining as many customers you possibly can, many of which are light buyers that will buy your brand only occasionally. The second point is that brands, even though they can be slightly differentiated, mainly compete as if they're near lookalikes. Like I own a Patagonia vest and also an LL Bean vest. They're basically the same in my mind. The third thing here is brand competition and growth is largely about building two market-based assets: physical availability and mental availability. Brands that are easier to buy for more people in more situations will own more market share. Innovation and differentiation, when it works, help to build brand assets, which lasts after competitors copy the innovation. So again, we'll like those are kind of like the main things. I'm just going to be repeating around these things. One, to drive the point home, but two, because I haven't had a lot of time to prepare for this. So bear with me here. So one of the chapters in the first How Brands Grow book is dedicated to how advertising really works. And it's really summarized by two main points. The first is that most advertising is spent to maintain market share, as opposed to fueling growth. And this is especially true for established brands. So let's see what the next point is here. Oh, for existing brands, most advertising is used to prevent what would have otherwise been a steady decline in sales. Sharp compares it to if you were flying a plane and the advertising are the engines that are flying the plane, and if you just start shutting off those engines, you're not just going to immediately plummet to the earth and crash. What's more likely is that you'll have a gradual decline, which comes into some issues. The second point here is that advertising sales effects, or the positive impact of advertising, is really spread out over time. Revenue, as a result of your advertising, comes in multiple forms. There is the direct response action, which means I saw this ad for this water bottle and I went and bought it. And then there's also the halo effect that impacts future decisions. Such as I saw this ad for a Yeti water bottle and I didn't buy it today, but in the future, if I'm buying a water bottle and I see a Yeti, I might be more likely, the probability of me converting is going to be slightly higher. But what's also important here is that a single advertisement can do both of these things to different people. It can drive some direct response, and then some of the other kind of harder to measure impact would be on the halo effect side. I already had this. Okay. This is more tied to the first point here, but sales figures don't drop suddenly when advertising is stopped. That's the plane not crashing into the earth, which is half the reason marketers find it hard to defend when their budgets get cut. And we've seen this with clients. We want to run a DMA test, which is basically like a market test. So we're gonna run these ads in Dallas, and then we're gonna measure the impact, and we're gonna measure the sales lift in Dallas. Well, that's not really a great way to look at it. It's the best that we have, but realistically, the long-term impact of this, or the real impact of this, is not going to be measured in your short window of time. And also, when you eventually pull your ads from Dallas, you're probably not going to see an immediate impact in your sales. So the current means of which we have to determine how we're measuring marketing effectiveness is not great. It's better than nothing, but it's not great. And just being aware of that is really important. So how do we understand some of the data here? So if we were to say Avis has 23% of the rental car market, so they have 23% market share. Me, as a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed marketing student, would have imagined that the rental car market would look something like this. There's 23% of the people who choose Avis, and then everyone else chooses other brands. But that's actually not correct. First of all, there's an underlying implication here that like some or most of these customers, or at least whatever, a percentage of customers of that 23% are loyal and exclusively choose Avis. That's not correct either. What this really is saying is that rental car customers, on average, choose Avis 23% of the time. So what their customer list really looks like is this, and this is uglier to most people who aren't statisticians, but this is an actual representation of what, and this is from, God, this was like a study from the 90s. This broke down Avis's customer cohort. So there are some people on the very far right side who choose Avis 100% of the time. My father is one of these people. He'll like exclusively choose Avis. But let's talk about mental and physical availability for a second. Do you want to know why my dad is able to use Avis every time? Because Avis is in basically every airport that he's ever flown into. They're physically available. Whereas, I don't know, Budget might not be in every airport. So just from a physical standpoint, you just can't actually buy Budget 100% of the time. So Avis has more market share. They gain more customers at all ends of the spectrum. So there are very few people, there is a fractional amount of people that buy Avis every time. Most of them do not. And this is true for any brand. Yes, exactly, Jakob. So some people are loyal, but even me, right? Like I'm pretty loyal to Delta, but Delta doesn't, like I have a Delta card, I have a ton of Delta points, whatever. Delta doesn't fly to every single airport that I'm going to. And I made the mistake of flying Frontier recently, even though there was a Delta flight, and I'm never making that decision again. That's a separate story.
Yeah.
This is true for almost any category that you look at. Between these two books, they look at whether it's rental cars or soft drinks or laundry detergent or health insurance or banking. The second book goes into different markets outside the US, into developing countries like India or Saudi Arabia or Brazil. You can run this study in almost any sort of brand across literally the globe, and you'll find this similar. This is called a negative binomial distribution. So it's kind of that right tail distribution where you're seeing the majority of these customers fall on the left side. So very few people, okay, let me skim through here. This is even true for brands with great loyalty programs like Avis, or really vocal, passionate fans like those of Coca-Cola. Now, we could all probably name people that only drink Coke. Our colleague Ronnie is one of those people. To the fact that like I've known Ronnie for almost my entire life, and earlier at some point, like I think like one of his college roommates had to have a talk with him at one point because like he was drinking so much Coca-Cola that it was becoming a concern. We could all name people like this, but they're an absolute fraction of the people that make up Coca-Cola's audience. Oh, this was the point I made before. Oh yeah, I guess this is important to drive home. So the rental car customer chooses Avis 23% of the time, but most of Avis's customers choose less than 23% of the time. Most of Avis's customers, from a quantity standpoint, are just they're light buyers. They just don't rent a car very often, and when they do, they happen to choose Avis 23% of the time or less. So this is Coca-Cola's buying frequencies. This is from TNS data. Sorry if it's a little blurry, from 2005. This shows some pretty interesting things. So customers who buy Coca-Cola once per week, so 52 times a year, Ronnie would fall into that category, I'm sure. That makes up just 4% of their total customer base. People are not as loyal as you would think, which is why competitor campaigns in Google Ads, for example, which is the act of bidding on your competitors' keywords, that's why this can work. This is why Home Depot needs to be bidding on the term Home Depot. Because if Lowe's chooses to put an ad there on that search, there's a percentage of customers that will be bought. And that's actually, I don't know how much time I'm gonna have to be able to get into this, but that's actually something that the Decoding the Messy Middle study actually proves. Spoiler alert, 30% of the time, even when people are doing a brand search, they can be swayed to buy the competitor's ad. So if you're asking about, hey, should I be doing brand search? The answer is yes. Anyway, the majority of customers of any brand would be considered a light buyer. They buy from the category only occasionally, and they're not completely loyal to one brand or the next. This is where the majority of your marketing efforts should be focused, which is influencing decisions of light buyers. So to drive this point home, let's look at a few facts from this Coca-Cola data from the TNS 2005 study. The average Coca-Cola customer purchases 12 times a year, which is about once per month. Now again, this is what their customer distribution looks like, right? So 12 times a year, like you can see 9. So okay. So the fact that the average customer purchases 12 times a year, what does that mean? Well, that's a misleading statistic. Because yeah, sure, the average customer buys 12 times a year, but very few people actually buy 12 times a year. This is just like a really large distribution that we're looking at. There's a lot of variance. The average buyer of any brand, Coca-Cola or otherwise, is therefore atypical. This is the crux of the argument that I said at the beginning. We need to stop saying people do this. People do not buy Coca-Cola 12 times a year. That is a misleading metric. People do not do anything. The average buyer is atypical. The typical Coca-Cola buyer purchases just 1 or 2 bottles of Coke per year, which is proven in the previous slide. This represents half of their customers. Half of Coca-Cola customers buy only 1 or 2 Coke products a year. This was mind-blowing the first time I read this. Which means, therefore, that a heavy buyer is someone that buys 3 or more bottles of Coca-Cola per year, which like is probably me. And I don't consider myself to be like a soft drink person. I like am not into like soda, but I probably buy more than 3 cans of Coke per year. So I'm a heavy buyer, which is mind-blowing. The heaviest buyers, those that buy at least once per week, make up just 4% of the customer base. I said that's that already. Okay, this is a bulky bit of text here, but this cohort, that 4%, generates 20% of Coca-Cola's total revenue. But that fact isn't really relevant to us as marketers because those people probably would have bought anyway. Your heaviest buyers of any brand are the most physically and mentally aware of your brand, and they're less likely to be impacted by, oh, they changed the package, they're running a sale, whatever. Like this is how like those people are not really factored in. That's more of like a brand management standpoint that does not impact marketing. Therefore, this again proves that most of Coca-Cola's customers are light buyers. This is good news for marketers because it means that we have value. If very few people fell into the light buyer category, it would mean that there would be nothing for us to actually do. Okay, so let's talk about light buyers. Based on this data, we're showing that the typical Coca-Cola customer has about a 1 in 300 chance of buying a bottle of Coke on any given day. The goal of Coca-Cola's advertising is to increase that probability. And this is important because it is not about binary. Like when Coke buys a Super Bowl ad, it is not about I'm trying to get this person to go to the store and buy a Coke right now. It is not that. It is I'm trying to increase the probability of a large amount of people with I'm trying to increase the probability that they'll buy today. Anyway, most consumers claim they're not responsive to advertising. They believe this because they don't recognize these really small changes on a day-to-day basis. If my probability goes from 1 out of 300 to 5 out of 300, I'm probably not going to notice the difference. However, if Coca-Cola successfully increases the probability of a light buyer from 1 in 300 chance to 2 in 300 chance, most people will not realize this, but Coca-Cola will have doubled their sales. And this is what the math proves. This is based on those earlier slides, the customer cohort distribution, 1 in 300. If they get to 2 in 300, we're looking at double revenue. Okay. So now I'm going to talk about customer retention versus customer acquisition to actually get to some of the marketing stuff. Surely everyone knows it's more expensive to retain a customer. That's what Ryan Howard says in the second episode of The Office. He's like schooling Michael Scott, saying that it's it's so much more expensive to sign new customers than it is to retain existing customers. Idiot. This is something that I really believed. I still, to a degree, believe it, but it's actually not true, because that fact that we've all subscribed to this is a fact that it's cheaper to retain a customer than it is to buy a new one. It is based off of a thought experiment. There was a Harvard Business Review article by Reichheld and Sasser, published in 1990. The excerpt that is quoted is literally a thought exercise and is not actually based on any empirical evidence that has never actually been studied. This thought experiment, and I could even read you the passage, but I'll save you the time. This thought experiment assumes that the incremental cost of customer retention is zero. And think about Adventure Media, right? If we want to increase our customer retention, it's not just going to come out of thin air. Like, there's certain things that we can do to like not lose as many clients, but probably we'll need to hire more people, buy new software. There's costs that go into these things. And this article that people reference, that they came to this conclusion, does not reference any of that. It should also be noted that Fred Reichheld, who is credited with writing this paper, was a partner at Bain & Company, and he led a division that developed loyalty programs for large brands. This guy is credited with inventing NPS, Net Promoter Score, and he had a vested interest in people believing that retention matters. This whole thing is a sales pitch. It's more expensive to sign a new customer than retain. That is literally just this guy walking into a CEO's office and saying, you need to buy my loyalty program because I'll do this mental exercise to prove to you. Okay, anyway, this is an important piece of information. Just keep that in mind. So how brands really grow. This is TAM is total addressable market. We're looking at the red of people who know your brand, who are a good fit for your product, and people who are ready to buy. So we're looking at the total customers that we acquire as those people in that very, very small little Venn diagram overlap there. If you just focus on preventing churn and increasing your repurchase rates, which is what a lot of our clients try to focus on, you're only working within the red bubble, and there's only so much growth available there. If your goal is to grow a brand and getting more business, increasing the size of the know your brand, that like purplish bubble, the red bubble, growing the size of it is the best use of your time and resources, at least according to Sharp. One big reason why this happens is because you compete with things outside of just the other brands in your category. This is really important. Avis is not just competing with Hertz. Avis is competing with Uber and taking a bus and having a friend pick you up from the airport and not going at all. Netflix's CEO, Reed Hastings, has compared this to Disney Plus and other competition in the streaming space. So he understands that consumers will probably subscribe to multiple services, which the data proves is true. The average American household subscribes to at least 1.5 streaming services. And these people are likely to hop back and forth between multiple services. But Hastings of Netflix really views the marketing opportunity in flipping those light buyers. Not the people that are ultimately loyal to one or the other. It's where can we target those people that are the lightest buyers. So what marketers need to know from this is that light buyers matter. We have to go after light buyers and non-consumers. You should always be increasing the number of potential buyers who have heard of you. Your job is to show up in as many buying windows and consideration sets as possible. Don't take your eyes off increasing the size of the red bubble. Second point, loyalty programs rarely improve the impact of marketing. or drive incremental revenue. You should be willing to challenge this idea of a loyalty program. Your heaviest buyers, people that buy Coca-Cola every day or every week, for example, are going to buy from you anyway. So a loyalty program or a sale or whatever is often just subsidizing purchases that would have happened regardless. Unless you have a higher level strategic reason for doing these programs, your resources are likely better spent on gaining new customers. Third piece, brands grow when they increase physical and mental availability. If you are going to only buy one can of soda per year, chances are it would be Coca-Cola. Not necessarily because you're loyal to Coke, but because this brand is more physically and mentally accessible than almost any other soft drink. It's probably the first one that comes to mind, and it can be bought just about anywhere. This concept where it's like, oh, they dominate physical and mental availability, that's referred to as natural monopoly law. Like, it is more difficult to not be a Coca-Cola customer than it is to be a Coca-Cola customer. That is natural monopoly law. Big brands win more customers simply because they are bigger. When consumers enter the market, they are most likely going to choose the most accessible and most available option. Now I just want to tangent for a second because this really hit home to me with like search strategy, because years ago, we brought on a big client, pictureframes.com, and the results over the first couple of months were not good. And we single-handedly saved the account with the implementation of one small thing. We input an RLSA campaign, so we took a retargeting audience of people who have come to the site before, included people that have purchased before, and we just bid very aggressively on that audience. So people that were searching for non-branded things, things like picture frames or custom frames, canvas frames, whatever, and we just bid like crazy on those keywords. That saved the account. And I did not know really how to describe that phenomenon until years later. What we were really doing there is we were just showing up. And we were basically making it harder for people to not buy from the competitors. They've been to our site before, they're familiar with our site, they're familiar with our brand, they've always spent some time, maybe they even bought a product from us in the past. By buying that advertisement, we're squeezing out the competition, and we're eliminating other people from being entered into the consideration set. We were owning the market share, we were maintaining our market share, and that's how we ultimately saved the business, or at least retained the account. So that's just a small anecdote there. This last piece that I mentioned, as far as like bigger brands have more loyalty because they're bigger. What I mean by that is this phenomenon called the double jeopardy law. So what this basically means is that, like, this here is a snapshot of the smartphone market. In any category you look at, again, whether it's smartphones, detergent, toothpaste, health insurance, banking, or even like banking in India, like any of these different categories, this book is like just filled with a million different studies. The brands at the top of the market share also have the highest repeat rate. The brands at the lower end of the market share are more likely to lose customers. And this is true even for brands that consider themselves niche. So there's a whole chapter dedicated to like, oh, dandruff shampoo, they're a niche thing, right? No, they're actually like, they don't target just dandruff people. They have a large percentage of the market compared to other, like, it's niche brands really don't matter is my small point there. In one of my earlier slides, I mentioned the term that people are satisficers, and this is what that means. So people use heuristics. The brain is kind of lazy. We don't like thinking when we don't have to. If something is good enough, even if it's not objectively the best solution for our needs, we might go forward with it because we'd rather think about other stuff and move on with our lives. Same reason I had to fill up my gas tank this morning. and I paid probably 30 cents more than I needed to because the gas station right near my apartment is it's the most convenient. I was satisfied. A huge part of this book is Sharpe's exploration of this double jeopardy law concept because everything kind of falls under this. So it just says loyalty is a function of market share. It's called double jeopardy because the brands with the high market share have the most loyalty, which therefore means that the brands with low market share have the lowest loyalty. What does this mean for marketers? The higher your market share, the higher your loyalty. And I guess, wait, let me just kind of flip back. Which really, that's why people are loyal. Like, it's not that Avis's loyalty program is what's driving people back. It's just because they're most physically and mentally available. They have the high market share. They're going to get more loyalty because people are satisficers, because they're most physically and mentally aware. It's just a cycle that keeps going and going and going. Don't spend too much time making emotional appeals or trying to build emotional connections, at least with, between brands and customers. People just don't really work that way. Yeah, sure, you can do it. You can pull it off. You can do, what, I don't know. Maybe there's a percentage of Patagonia's customers that buy Patagonia because they're good for the world or something. But that's really hard. The fact that I can't even think of an example right now should be enough proof to show that this is really hard to do, and it's probably like you should think that we are not the exception. No? Yeah. That any individual brand is not the exception to this rule. Last piece here is lower the friction of buying from you. People default to the path of least resistance. Make it easy for people to self-serve, to buy your product. You should have better customer service. You should reduce the response time when someone has a question, or how challenging your checkout process is. This is the main reason why I've become a higher advocate for e-commerce brands selling on Amazon. Even though I don't love it, I don't love the concept of it. It sucks, could hurt your margins. It's bad for the brand. But at the end of the day, if you want to win market share, which is ultimately how you grow, you need to just gain as many customers as possible. And a lot of your customers are going to be buying from Amazon, whether you like it or not. The last piece of this, which I won't go into because I really went over time. All of this is compounded by this really awesome study that Google did called Decoding the Messy Middle. I did a full podcast on this. So if you go back into the How to Hide a Dead Body archives, you'll find me talking about all this stuff. But you could also read this. There's podcasts on this specifically. There's a lot of great data. This is one of the most expensive research studies that Google ever funded. It was a really extensive study across a number of different countries. They did 31,000 buying simulations, and they were able to chart out what the modern decision-making process looks like. And it sort of looks like this, where exposure is this outer ring, where like your brand exposure and how people feel when they see your ads, when they go to your website. Oh, it's a .io instead of a .com. Is that weird, or do I like that? Like all these like little things about exposure. It takes place all the time. It's not that awareness thing when you're sitting on your TV that I explained at the beginning of this presentation. Exposure is always happening. You have a trigger here that says, I think I need laundry detergent, or I'm considering buying a new, health insurance product. And then you go into this messy middle, where on the left side you have exploration, which is the act of expanding your consideration set. So you're doing Google search, health insurance providers in New York, and it's like, oh wow, there's a lot. And then the evaluation stage is where you start to narrow down those choices. And it's like, oh, well, this one's more affordable. This one seems to support mental health. This one will help me with this, that, the other. That's when you're trimming back your consideration set. But sometimes it's like, oh, wait, this one comes with pet insurance. There's a whole market for pet insurance. Now you're back in the exploration phase. So this is really proof. And again, 31,000 simulations here. To prove that like it is not a linear process. People are not searching for one thing and then getting remarketed to, and that's how they buy. It is a back and forth jumbled mess where eventually people get into the evaluation stage, they trim it back to one or two things, and then they drop into the purchase phase. There was a really interesting part of this study where they they would ask people and say, okay, what, like in a category, let's say it's shampoo, and they would say, what's your favorite brand? They say, my favorite brand is Tresemme. I say, great, what's your second favorite brand? They'll say, my second favorite brand is Herbal Essences. They would let some time go by, let's say 10 minutes, they distract them, whatever. They come back and they say, okay, in the shampoo category, here's a list of a couple different options. Which of these brands are you most likely to buy? And I should remember what the statistic is, but it was like close to half the amount of people, or I think it was 40% of people, even though they had previously selected Tresemme as their favorite brand, would then choose Herbal Essences, which is crazy. It proves that people are not as loyal and they're very serendipitous and fickle. The second part of this study is that they introduced a fake brand. They made a brand, they called it Hidden Gem Shampoo, and they introduced it in the consideration set, and they just asked people, would you be willing to buy this brand over Tresemme? They didn't tell them it was fake. They just like had a marketing campaign around it. And like 30 to 40% of people were like, yeah, I'd buy that brand. So even though people are loyal and they chose this is my favorite, this is my second favorite, they were still willing to consider something else. And it's because the modern buying journey is very complicated. We have access to unlimited information. Part of what the study shows is that the internet evolved from this place where people just used to go to compare prices to now where people compare everything. What is the difference between a down jacket and a feather? What's the opposite of a down jacket? I don't know. Great question.
Look at it.
We're gonna answer that, Josh.
I think is it a parka? Is that what it is?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Whatever a non-down jacket is. I should look that up. That was a bad example. Or like, hey, is pet insurance really valuable? It's where people go to evaluate everything, and you spin off into a million different directions. So it's really hard to keep up. But what's really interesting about all this stuff together is it really ties back. If you dig into the, I actually had the, it's a really long paper. It's like the full report. If you really go through this, they talk about all these different like laws, and all of the laws are similar to what Byron Sharp wrote about and how brands grow, including, for example, he calls it the power of showing up, which is like you just have to be there. You have to be in the consideration set. That's literally physical availability, just said in a different way. So my point is, going back to all this stuff here, is that I think it's just a really good mental model because we have grown up in this environment where we were either taught or we like to think that the buyer's journey is linear, and we like to design things that look great on a mural board or things that look great on a spreadsheet or even in a presentation. Can be drawn nicely like this, for example, but in reality, things are much more complicated than they really seem. The things that matter most are this concept of physical availability. We have to show up. We have to be the first thing that comes to mind. And it's important to be distinct. It's not necessarily important to differentiate yourself from other brands, but what really moves the needle, and the data supports this, is that you are different. I made the analogy yesterday to Asurion that Safelite Repair, Safelite Replace is not like a great ad, but I remember it. It's distinct. And if I woke up tomorrow and saw a crack in my windshield, they would probably at the top of my consideration set. They might be the only person and only brand in my consideration set because that tagline is just stuck in my brain. So as part of how to use this moving forward, I just think it's really important to just think about that pendulum swinging back and forth. This is just one argument. I'm not trying to say that we should start doing mass marketing for clients. At the heart of it, we are people that make our living on targeted marketing. But it is also important to consider the other angle of it. That's all I got. Thank you for bearing with me. I know I went way over. But yeah, does anyone have any questions? All right. Lost Avery.
Thanks. I like that.
My pleasure. I hope this was helpful. What do you guys think?
Very interesting.
Thank
All
you.
right. I'll take
Send me please the recording because.
I will.
Okay, thank you so much. I read your email before, so.
No, you were CC'd on the email last night. You got the majority of it anyway. But
yeah, I know, but I like when you explain things. So yes.
Cool. Sounds good. Lucian, what do you think?
I think it was a great presentation, really. There are some things I would need to think about, but overall, I think it's definitely like in the right direction.
Have you ever? I feel like you may have stumbled upon this book before. Have you stumbled upon any of this stuff?
I did, yeah. I haven't read it yet, only a little bit, like on Blinkist.
Okay.
And I also have another one called What Great Brands Do. I think that was also pretty interesting.
Okay.
And I'm also reading a couple on strategy right now, but not so much like brand. But
Nice.
these two I wanted to read soon as well, mostly
Yeah.
for Grown Brilliance.
It's really interesting. There's a whole piece. I mean, I like summarized a few of the key points. There's like a whole thing about price promotions that really shifted my opinion on it. But I think like what's interesting, right, is like Slinger Bag, I think, is the exception. Because like I think that like, so the book argues like, hey, listen, like price promotions really just for the most part are spent on people that would have bought anyway. Okay, fine. Now that might be the case across the board for most brands. For Slinger Bag, I think it's different because Slinger Bag is a product you really only buy once, and it's a luxury product that a lot of other people would never have bought if it did not go on sale. Like I don't think that those people would have bought anyway. And in this idea of like, hey, you need to capture as much market share and grow the product and sell as many things as possible, I think that the once a year Black Friday sale for Slinger Bag is like a very important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, well, that really worked. I don't know for sure if that also stole like from future customers, which I think is what they said.
That was there.
Maybe it did from some of them. And also, I think in like for every business, there is a segment of customers that are like predisposed to buy on discount, right? Like they would buy on discount.
Yeah.
And otherwise might not buy. So maybe it's still beneficial to use promotional codes, but not like right away, right to the
You gotta
top
go.
of the funnel.
I have another one.
Later on.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's just interesting. I mean, I kind of like these types of texts that really say like, oh, you've been thinking this way this whole time. Well, here's the exact opposite. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So,
That's nice.
all right.
And also agree with like the top of the mind thing. I think that's really a big piece of it. And we got some research from AB like before with the stores. Was it Michael Ram or someone?
Yeah.
Some brand. So basically the companies that had physical stores were getting a lot of exposure, like awareness.
Interesting.
People. So the online sales were getting an increase as well because of that.
I think there's a lot to that, and I think even like aside from the exposure piece, I think that like that having a physical store, it just increases the legitimacy by such a large factor. Like if you could say
Yeah,
like
there are multiple factors.
it's almost why like people say, and actually this is I mentioned somewhere in the book, like part of why people spend so much in advertising is to prove to customers that you have enough money to buy the ads. It's like, oh, like there's like this weird thing where people are like, oh, that must be a good brand. They must be big because they just bought a Super Bowl commercial. The same thing I think happens with in e-commerce. If an e-commerce brand can like say, oh, we have a physical location, it's like, oh wow, like you can afford a physical building, like you must be good. It's like a very weird subliminal thing, but I think it makes an impact.
So I think it all relates to like trust in a company, and that trust can be like signaled from different points of view, like from people, from the type of media you buy on TV, and all of this stuff. I was thinking before, like why do people not buy so much from no-name brands? Like you send them from an ad to a company site that they don't know it and they might not buy from it. I mean, the conversion rate might not be so great because they don't know the company. They have a lot to think about. Who are these guys? Like all of that stuff. And why are they much more willing to buy from a known brand? And why do people tend to automatically prefer a known brand over a not known brand, right? And I think it's because a known brand has all of these things going for it. Like they've heard about their friends talk about it. They've heard from people on TV about it. They've seen all of the ads. They've seen all the banners, like billboards and stuff. So I think all of that influences people's decision.
Yeah, I think it's on the one end, is this quality or am I going to get scammed? Like, is this worth the money I'm spending on it?
Yeah,
On
especially
the other
online.
spectrum is the prestige. So it's like then it gets into the branding piece of like, oh, I'm driving this car because, and then it's the reverse of like, oh, I have this car, therefore now you think that I have a certain amount of money, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You want to.
Yeah, I think that goes into other things as well. I heard from Russell Brunson, the ClickFunnels guy, once. He was talking about like the status, social status, and how for him, I don't know, buying a Porsche is like social status things, like a signal, right? And for his wife, it wasn't. Like she was saying, I don't want a Porsche, I want like a minivan. And he was wondering about it and asking her and so on. And he figured out that she wanted a minivan because of what her friends would think about her if she bought a Porsche and she was a mom and so on. So for her, buying a minivan was a social status thing, right? Not a Porsche.
Right, like they know that they have money, but they're so humble. They're such good people that they're not willing to flaunt it. That's like next level, like second stage bragging.
Yeah. The book Cash Advertising, I never really finished it.
Yeah.
It talks about a lot of these things. Do you know it?
Yeah, it's not that great. It's basically a collection of blog posts. It's short. It's a
Yeah,
quick-
I only got like a quarter into it.
Yeah.
But it was talking
All right.
about some of these things.
Yeah. I gotta run. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick, for the presentation.
Thanks.